You. My name is Catherine. I'm one of the events managers at the Wine Society. And if this is your first Zoom with us, welcome. It's lovely to have you. Please do use the chat function to let us know where you are, what you may be enjoying this evening, and feel free to use the Q&A to pop any questions in as we go. Now, I've just said to let us know and let we are welcoming you, but it is just myself this evening. So please do bear with me while I will be keeping an eye on the chat, keeping an eye on my notes, and also tasting the wines and some dishes along with you. Let me know if you have got the all four wines or if you've got anything different as well. It'd be lovely to know what other pairings you might have. I have got the four suggested. We will be starting with the Society Saumur. And in terms of dishes, this evening I've got a little prawn pad thai, which we'll come on to a little bit later. And I also have some Thai fish cakes as the first course. Also, if there's a bit of a group of you, a bit of a crowd, and you've got varying opinions on the different wines and pairings, do pop it in to the chat. It's nice to have a little bit of healthy competition between the wines and the dishes. And if you wanted to share any photos or any kind of thoughts on social media, you can absolutely tag the Wine Society. We would love to see those and see how you're enjoying it. So, if this is your first Friday night takeaway session with us, it's a very informal evening where I get to do one of my favourite things, which is talk about food and wine pairings. And obviously, there's a lot of conflating thoughts behind food and wine pairing, the seriousness of it, the lack of seriousness to it. I like to approach it with some sort of key building blocks that kind of help you when looking at whether you want to balance your foods and your wines or have a little bit of a complementary contrast. But these are just suggestions. And what I would always say is you are the expert of your own palate. You know what you like. And ultimately, it's you that is eating the dishes and drinking the wines. So if it works for you, you crack on. Now, I've chosen Thai food as the first dish or the first cuisine that we'll be looking at for the Friday night takeaway sessions in 2025 because we recognise that it was one that we did way back in 2021 when we were sort of kicking off the series of the Friday night takeaway. And so we thought it would be a nice one to revisit. And also because we've made it through January. So please do feel free to pour yourself a glass of fizz because I definitely have, because well done us, we've made it through January. It is starting to brighten up ever so slightly of an evening. Not quite this evening. I have got 3 lamps, the big light and a ring light going to try and make sure you can see me. But the flavours that you get in Thai food is, for me, one of those ones that it is not to align kind of morality to food, not to say, it's a good takeaway, but it does feel nourishing. There's lots of fresh, zesty flavors. There is some richness, there's spice. There's all the sort of things that ingredients and flavors that if you perhaps put them into, a tea or a tincture, it would feel like it is doing good things for you. But it also is just very delicious. And there is a lot of variety, which we'll see as we work through. It is great to see what everyone has done. There's some that have, you've made some pork lard from scratch, Nicola. That sounds great. I love pork lard, which is one of the reasons I suggested it as a dish. But I also have made a little visit to M&S to get some bits because I've got a very good neighbourhood Thai takeaway nearby. But it is a Friday night, and I imagine they are very busy, so I didn't want to risk having a delay on delivery. We've got the white and red with Thai fish cake. Oh, this sounds great. It sounds like everyone's got a real feast going on. So let's kick off into it. So as I mentioned, we'll be starting with the Saumur, which is a sparkling wine. I've got mine as a half bottle because it is just myself this evening. And I also think half bottles are cute. So I often quite enjoy having a half because it's just nice, isn't it? It's just nice to perfect little size. Um, so yes, so I've gone for the half bottle, but if there's a crowd of you, or even if there's not a crowd and you've decided to open up a full bottle, good on you. Why not? So yes, so it is the Saumur with the fish cakes. So with the Tod Mun Pla as the first course or the first little pairing. I always find that when it's something like Thai food or a takeaway in general, it is that thing of getting a few good dishes, putting them on the table, and hoping everyone tucks in. So the Society Saumur. Now this is a traditional method sparkling wine, and as you may know from the Saumur region is in the Loire, so predominantly the grape variety is Chenin Blanc. It does also have some Chardonnay in, um, but not a huge amount. And it also does have a little bit of Cabernet Franc, which will just enhance the natural fruitiness of the wine. Now, I'll bring back up in a moment that little infographic I had about the traditional um, method for making sparkling wine. But this is a really, really kind of fleshy, but not overly ripe. It's a little bit honeyed. There's lovely freshness to it. It's crisp. We describe it as the ideal party fizz. And actually, I quite agree. It's I know Cremant seems to be sort of the flavor of the month in terms of affordable sparkling wines, affordable traditional method sparkling wines, and Saumur is in some ways a little bit slept on, especially when you've got Cremant de Loire, so same region, same majority grape varieties. But I think the Saumur region or the little micro region of Saumur in the Loire actually create some really lovely wines that are also very affordable and really delicious. And having the Chenin Blanc means you're getting those lovely orchard flavors. There's apple, pear. It does have that slight honeyed note to it as well. Also, being a sparkling wine, it's perfect with anything fried. So with your little fried fish cakes or any other of those sort of appetizer type little bites, it's really perfect because you're balancing out and cutting through that slightly oily richness while still having some lovely fruitiness to it as well. Now I'm going to bring back up the infographic on the method for making the Saumur or any other traditional sparkling wine, traditional method sparkling wine. And if you're not familiar with this method, it's where the second fermentation happens in the bottle. So as you can see, your base wine is created in barrel or sometimes in stainless steel vats, but often in a larger barrel when you're looking at those traditional French regions. Then the bottling and second fermentation happens, which leaves the lees and those lovely yeast cells in the bottle, and that is where your aging comes from. Those lovely kind of brioche, biscuity textural elements to the wine. So depending on how long you're leaving it on lees, and the amount of lees you've got in there, and also the type of the grape variety you're using will influence the flavour that you're getting from your wine at the end. Once it's had that period of aging and riddling, which is where the bottles are rotated and eventually going from horizontal up to an angle, sort of, is it 45? My maths and kind of measurements aren't great, but it goes from this to this so that the yeast cells all concentrate into the neck of the bottle and they can be expelled when they are at the optimum aging of the wine before it then is further aged once the dosage is added if they want to add a little extra sweetness or just wanting to top up the bottles. So you've got that lovely textural note to it. This isn't hugely yeasty. in flavour. I think you're getting a lot more of the fruity nuance coming through. If you do have the Saumur and you're enjoying it as well, please do let me know what you think of it. I think there's definitely texture there, but that's also enhanced from the fizz, less so from a real super leesy, yeasty note to it. So a little bit about Gratien and Meyer before we just talk about why I've chosen it with the fish cakes as that food pairing. But Gratien and Meyer are a very long established producer in the Loire Valley, the Anjou-Saumur region. They're pretty much a jewel in that region. And it was founded by Alfred Gratien in 1864 of Champagne Alfred Gratien. He was just 23 when he sort of founded the Gratien and Meyer winery sort of house in the Loire, but that was the same year that he also established the Champagne House. So he was very busy and recognized the quality of the fruit, the quality of the location in the Loire. They do buy in their grapes and must. They are looking, or they have invested in their own vineyards. They had their first crop in 2018, and they aim to kind of cover around 50% of their bottling in due course. But buying in means that they have the pick of really great grape growers. It also means that they can blend to a consistent style. See, this one being the Society Saumur, our sparkling wine buyer for this region, for the French sparkling wines, will work with the producers, work with the winemakers, and blend it to the style that we want. Now, where the Meyer comes from is from Albert Jean Meyer, who was an enthusiastic wine expert from Alsace, and he joined forces with Alfred Gratien in 1874. So the year that we were founded was when Albert joined Alfred, and when Alfred died in 1885, the Meyer family was entrusted with the company, and they've continued to uphold its excellent traditions. We've been working with Gratien and Meyer and having their wines as a top choice for the society since 1906. So a very long time, and they're still responsible for the Society's Saumur, the Society's Saumur Rosé, and the Society's Celebration Cremant de Loire. So the Gratien and Meyer house is on the outskirts of Saumur, and it overlooks the Loire River. So you'll see here, this is the view from some of their vineyards, and you can see the Loire down here. And if you have a look here as a different aspect, you can see them in the valley, the beautiful kind of facade of that really kind of long established Gratien and Meyer winery. And as you can see, it's a great place to visit if you are wanting to perhaps head there this summer, or at least any point when the seasons start to pick up and get a little bit warmer. They are open for visitors, and they have a lot of little functions and things that go on, but it's in a beautiful part of the Loire Valley. One of the great things about being so close to the river is that obviously it helps moderate the climate. So it is similar to the climate of Champagne, but a little less severe. And the hillsides store that daytime heat, but the cool nights then provide moisture. So you've got that lovely balance of making sure that the the grapes reach their optimum ripeness. So you've got that lovely fruitiness coming through while still having that lovely fresh high acidity, which is what we want when you're pairing with something that is fried and that kind of lovely kind of crispy texture to a bit of food. You've also got in Saumur the famous tofu soils, which are limestone, and again, ideal for sparkling wine production, excuse me, as they help to enhance and retain that really lovely acidity. The cellars at Gratiana are dug right deep into the chalky soils, and they really haven't changed much since the house was founded. Although the winery has undergone quite a bit of modernisation in recent years, so they can still retain the kind of tradition in the making, but they keep up with the modernisation of the kind of practicalities of a winery for today. Now, the dish is the Tod Mun Pla, the Thai fish cake. So traditionally, it is more of a really popular street food. You'll find it in a lot of food markets. There's a lot of different vendors, and it's found its way, particularly over into the UK, as a appetizer or starter on our takeaway menus or our Thai restaurant menus. It originates from the coastal regions, using fresh white fish, sometimes from the sort of the catfish family of fish. So it's the thinner kind of fillets. It's flaky. Depending on the person that makes it, they could look to do more of a sort of a ground fish paste. That they then form into the patties along with other ingredients. Often you'll find green beans in there, kaffir lime leaves, red curry paste, which obviously has those lovely white pepper, garlic, galangal, or galangal. I'm not always quite sure how to pronounce it. And then like cumin, coriander, the lovely fresh flavours. Often in the UK as well, you'll find it made with salmon. So either on a takeaway menu or when it is sort of Thai style salmon fish cakes in the supermarket, or even just Thai seasoned salmon in those sort of pre-made things. Now, that isn't necessarily the most traditional fish to be using, and I think that speaks a little bit more to kind of consumer preference in this country. I would say that if you have a salmon based fish cake, or you are looking to use those flavors with salmon, then you might prefer actually using the Saumur Rosé as a pairing, because it has that extra bit of Cabernet Franc. It increases the fruitiness a little bit, and salmon being quite a strong flavored fish of itself means that you've got a little bit more of a balance going on there. But as I say, it's very much the flavors that influence the pairing rather than necessarily the fish itself. And you've got that lovely intensity and fragrance and aromatic notes from those different things, as well as having a little bit of spice, a little bit of heat, which means having that extra fruitiness and that sort of honeyed ripeness that gives you a perception of sweetness in the wine means that you are tempering any of that slightly fiery spice that comes through, particularly if you've got a slightly spicier dipping sauce to have with it. Now, if anyone has made their own, or is perhaps wanting to make their own from a vegetarian standpoint, a suggestion from us that we find works often really well to kind of replicate that fish texture, and you'll often see this being used when we do things that are similar dishes for our lunches and dinners, is using hearts of palm, which you can get canned very easily. It has that lovely flakiness and slightly textural, like fleshiness that replicates the fish, while still being able to carry flavour well and not impart too much of its own flavour on there as well. We are, Anna, don't worry, we are not on a different course or wine. We're still on the Saumur and the fish cakes. So I'll let you just kind of regroup and catch up. But it is the Saumur, which is sparkling wine with the fish cakes, being lovely, fruity, a little bit of that lovely texture. Also, the bubbles really do help as well to add that textural cleansing element to the wine when you are having something that's a bit oilier. I always find it's quite refreshing to have something that's a bit bubbly as well. Oh, Sandra and Mark, what are hearts of palm? Hearts of palm are, they look a little, when you open the can, they're down the vegetable aisle. Um, when the sort of the canned vegetable aisle, when you open the can, they look a little bit like if you crossed a white asparagus with the white part of a leek. Um, and it's from a palm plant. And they're just sort of trimmed down and processed in. When you open the can, it smells a little bit like canned sweet corn. They're quite crunchy. Then they don't have too much of their own flavour going on, I must admit. I don't find, but they are great to have that kind of flaky addition to, replicate fish, or just to add that in their own right. If you just wanted to kind of use a bit of hearts of palm, they're also great if you slice them because you can sort of pop them out as little rings. You can make calamari with them as well. So there's a few little um, hearts of palm hints and tips there for you. Oh, Jane, you've got some homemade Thai fish cakes and they're working great. And there's some more from Lucy as well. It's going great. You've got takeaway ones and they're quite spicy. Lovely. It sounds like everyone has got a real feast. So I'm glad you're enjoying it. Now we will go on to the next dish and wine. Oh, and Adrian, that they adding them to a salad. That sounds great. I can't wait for the weather to warm up slightly, so I can really go hard on salads. And I like to add like proteins and carbs and beans and all sorts to salads, and not just about that leaf life. But yeah, I do need it to be a little bit warmer. Having said that, the next dish is I had it down as a minced pork salad, which is Laab Moo, mainly because that is how I most often see it on a takeaway menu or on a Thai restaurant menu in this country. However, um, it's not always served as a salad. Often it's served with sticky rice, so as a dish on itself with sticky rice. But often in this country, you'll see them in sort of little gem lettuce cups. So you can always make them into like a little wrap. And that's why I've put it as a salad. And it also feels still quite fitting as a starter to your sort of dinner. So I've just made my glass ready for the next wine, which is a Portuguese rosé, which is from the Beira Interior area of Portugal. And if you have done any or many of our food and wine pairing events with myself before, you'll know, much like the rest of my team and a lot of my colleagues at the wine industry and the wider wine, my colleagues in the wine society, sorry, and in the wider wine industry, rosé is not just for summer, it is an all seasons wine, all varieties. You can have it any time of year, and it works perfectly for food and wine pairing because you have the freshness of a white wine with the intensity and flavor and textures of a red combined. So it is, I would always say that if you are struggling on what wines to pair with a particular dish, always consider a rosé. So let's talk about this rosé. This is the Rui Madeira Beyra Rosé from the Beira Interior, and it's a 2023 vintage. Now, Rui Madeira not to overly confuse things, is actually the name of the winemaker. Um, and he makes his wines in high altitude vineyards, as you can see from the information on the screen there. If you have the bottle, you will see as well that it's got a very convenient map on there. However, if you don't, or if it's a little bit too small, I do also have a map here. So this is the Beira Interior area where this wine is grown, where the grapes for this wine is grown, and where they are situated for the winemaking as well. So if you see, you've got the sea here, you've got Porto, and you follow the Douro all the way, and it's onto the sort of border with Spain. So it is near some mountainous regions. It's also in the Douro River basin. So it has, again, river influence, and it has that high altitude. And that is really key because it means that you are, again, getting acidity. I'm going to repeat acidity quite a lot as we go because that is one of the key structural elements to consider for food and wine pairing. But also it means that you are getting ripeness. So this is 100% Tinta Roriz, and that is the Portuguese name for Tempranillo. So you may be familiar with Tempranillo in Spanish red wines and rosés. Obviously, it is one of the key grapes that is used in making in the production of Rioja. But in Portugal, it is Tinta Roriz. And when you hear it as a grape variety in Portugal, it may be setting off little bells of that's something that they use when making port. And it is. So it does have a slightly thickish skin. So it does add some lovely colour. It also adds a lovely little bit of texture. Now, I'm quite pale, so hopefully you can, oh, it's blending in a little bit, isn't it? It's more of a sort of onion skin peachiness pink to this rosé. It's not in that really true red. It's got more of a little peachy orange tint to it. It smells lovely, I think. It's got that really nice red fruit to it, crunchy red fruit. So we're looking at things like our cranberries, red currants. There's a little bit of a soft sort of strawberry note to it, but it's not overly sweet. It's not like perfectly in season strawberries. There's still a little sharpness to it. And I think as well, it has a lovely little citrus note to it, more leaning into that sort of blood orange grapefruit note rather than the sort of lemony lime that you get in other wines. But it does have a little kind of citrusy tang and some creaminess to it. So there is, in terms of the winemaking, there is a little bit of kind of that texture coming from the skins. So when the wine is made, you're obviously pressing and getting a little bit of the color, which is what comes from the skin. So you are getting a little bit of those tannin textures coming in as well. Obviously not to the same extent that you would for a red wine, but enough that it gives a little bit of grip. And again, because there is quite a bit of, or there can be quite a bit of chili heat, some kind of savory flavors in the Laab Moo, as well as being a little bit sweet. I always find that pork as a meat carries a little bit of sweetness. And if you think about what you would pair with pork in other ways, so, a roast pork, you'd have apple sauce. If you were doing, maybe pork on the barbecue, often it goes great with a little bit of sweeter barbecue sauce. Having a little bit of sweetness from the fruit in the rosé also really blends really nicely. So the Vineyards are planted at an average altitude of 750 meters, planted in schist soils, which is really great for the drainage and means that again you're not waterlogging your vines, so they are putting their efforts into getting the grapes to the optimum ripeness. You're not putting out loads of lovely lush leaves. The schist puts a little bit of stress on their growing conditions. It's not the nicest of soils, it's not the most nutrient dense at all. So it means that they are putting their efforts into producing these perfect grapes because they want to survive, and to survive, they need to be pollinated and so on and so on. So they need to flower and produce fruit to make them appealing to their pollinators. And it also means that they make great yields for producing delicious wine. Now, Rui is as a winemaker has spent a lot of time in different wine regions, worked in different wine regions in different capacities, but he wanted to return to Portugal, mainly because on his travels as a wine professional, he was recognizing that Portugal has a really rich and treasured history of unique grape varieties, unique terroir that is capable of producing world-class wines. And it's interesting that this is 100% Tintura Rif. It is a single varietal wine, still wine from Portugal. Often, a lot of the Portuguese wines at this similar price point are blends. Blends in Portugal is like, almost like a bread and butter for Portuguese winemakers. But it's that recognition that there is absolutely option and interest to create single varietal wines, and the ability of the terroir in Portugal, particularly in the Beira Interior, Beira Alta region, where he is situated, means he can do that. He cultivates organically, and one of the really fun things that I think is that much like a lot of wineries and vineyards around the world and in England, they employ, and I use that term loosely, they employ a herd of sheep to keep the weeds at bay, just to do some gentle pruning of the surrounding areas in amongst the vines. He looks like he's very hard at work and very interested in his job. And while they are doing that, they also can help add some fertilization, shall we say, to the schist soils. So although it is, as mentioned, a little bit of a tricky soil in terms of nutrients, and that is really beneficial to the grape growing, it do also still need a little bit of help and nutrients to the soil, and that helpfully and freely comes from the sheep that are making their way around the vines. So it looks like people are enjoying it. I'm just going to have a little look in the chat. So Richard, your fish cakes are salmon based. Zwei Rosé goes well, as does pinotage, soft, smooth fruit. Well, that sounds lovely. It looks like so many of you have made your own Laab Moo. Now, that is great. I'm very impressed because if I was watching this as a punter, I think, the last Friday in January, the end of January, I would very much have relied on the takeaway option. So Laab Moo, just a little bit of background and history to that as a dish. As mentioned, it's ground pork. Laab being the kind of the ground element or minced, and moo being pork. So if you see moo, on a menu. You'll often see it on a menu in different dishes, but it is pork that it relates to. So mixed with lime juice, fish sauce, which adds a very kind of savory note, that umami, so lots of glutamate in there, chili, fresh herbs, so maybe some coriander, maybe a little bit of mint, some Thai basil, and toasted rice, which adds that lovely texture to it, which really balances and is really complemented nicely by the texture in the rosé. Excuse me. It also has a touch of that salinity that actually I think really goes nicely when you have it with a dish that has quite a bit of fish sauce in it. I know that can be quite an overpowering flavor to to some people, and particularly if you were you know putting quite a bit in, it can be quite pungent. Um, but I think it's such a unique flavor and such a distinctive flavor in Thai cuisine. It's really nice to find a wine or another a drink, a flavor that complements it and balances with the intensity of that fish sauce. Now, again, with vegetarian options, you could recreate the feel of this dish with minced mushrooms because you'll get that sort of texture to it, and you can again a mushroom, particularly if you're using sort of like a button mushroom that is relatively mild in flavor, it will really help take on the flavors of the seasoning, and you can get some really great vegetarian sort of fish sauces now that are a little bit seaweed based but still have that quite distinct kind of almost muskiness to them. So you can replicate it there. Now, in terms of the origins of this dish, although it is very popular um, on Thai menus now, it's actually the national dish of Laos, and Laos being a country that borders Thailand to the west and the southwest. There's a lot of influence into northeastern and northern Thailand, where this dish has become very popular. And there's a high proportion of Lao diaspora in that northern, northeastern area of Thailand. So it's unsurprising that they would want to have their national dish with them. And it's really taken off, and it's something that we really kind of uh, enjoy and appreciate, I would say, perhaps in this country. It's one of the really popular dishes to go for. The four dishes that I have chosen and that we are talking about are ones that came up sort of time and time again in those lists of, the UK's top 10 Thai takeaways and the UK's top 50 favorite Thai dishes. So they are the more popular ones. I wonder if in some part it's because the UK perhaps has quite an affinity to minced meat. And I'm sure we all, or I'm sure many of us, grew up on, regular recurrences of a spag bol, a chili, or even just, mince and gravy. Mince being quite a quick way of cooking meat. And it's something that is kind of recognizable in texture. I think perhaps that has had some help in influencing its popularity in this country, as well as being a really delicious and fresh and spicy dish. Oh, Jim saying that Sarah is enjoying the rosé, which works well with your first time Laab Moo, allegedly a touch too much chili. I was going to say, I don't know if you can have too much chili, but actually, you probably can. If you've maybe got some yogurt on hand, that might help you out. Um, but yeah, it does sound like people are enjoying the rosé. Has anyone tried the rosé with the fish cakes as well, other than Richard? I know you were saying that the you've had some rosé with your fish cakes, because I imagine as well that would also be a delicious pairing. I think that's one of the nice things about these sort of things as well, is that there is a lot of transferability of the food and wine pairings. So, if there's a lot of similarity in flavor, a lot of similarity in what you're wanting the wine to add or um, enhance with your dish. So it's nice to kind of have that transferability as well. Oh, Sandra, you've just had a spoon of creme fraiche, and Alison just got the yogurt out of the fridge. Well, well done on being prepared for your dishes this evening. Um, I have my trusty tea towel on hand because I knew I would make a spillage, and I just have, so I'm just going to clear that. Um, and I think we may well be ready to move on to our next food and wine. Now, I don't want you to feel like you're having to rush through. And I'm going to flip this actually and talk a little bit about the food before I then talk about the third wine. So we're going to talk about the food first, because on the face of it, pad thai may seem quite just a standard, nice noodle dish that in this country we just recognize it as, a Thai dish. That if you said to someone, "Oh, could you name some Thai food?" Pad Thai would be something that I imagine a lot of people would be able to just suggest off the top. Probably because it's got Thai in the name, but there is quite a bit of interesting history to it. So we'll start by kind of having a little talk about the key sort of flavors that you will get in a pad thai. So regardless of your protein choice, whether you've gone prawn, tofu, chicken, a combination of all three, you will also have peanuts, egg, often bean sprouts, lime juice, again, fish sauce, and tamarind. And your noodles are a rice noodle. That's a key thing. We'll come back to that shortly. But tamarind is one of those really distinct key flavors in a pad thai. It adds that tangy sweetness. The tamarind is a seed pod from the tamarind tree. It's used extensively in Southeast Asian and Indian cooking, flavoring curries, chutneys, bean dishes, and obviously in Thai cuisine as well. It's that unique sort of sweet and sour flavor. It comes as the paste form, or you can actually buy it as the pods. Have great fun getting the tamarind pulp out yourself. It looks like a broad bean pod, but a little bit sort of bulkier. It's quite a dry casing when you buy it from the from a supermarket or from a food market. And the seeds are then bound by that sort of stringy membrane with the fleshiness inside as well. It is pretty fun to de-pod your own tamarind. However, I do appreciate it is quite time consuming. So it's a little bit sort of date-like as well if you've never had one in its sort of original natural form. And it is in the legume family. So it is indigenous to Africa, but again, it's grown in tropical climates around the world. As mentioned, India, Southeast Asia, the Caribbean. And when it is combined with fish sauce, vinegar, lime juice, a little bit of sugar, it is the sort of staple base sauce for pad thai. Now, this is where it gets interesting, and I'm just seeing a couple of other comments. Oh, the spiciness. Oh, the spiciness of your Laab Moo overpowered the rosé. That's a shame, Barry, but I hope you enjoyed both almost as a parallel, even if they were a little bit even if the spice was a little bit too powerful. Oh, Andrew, for the pad thai, you've got the Ruppertsberger Heiberg Riesling. That is one of my favorite Rieslings. That is a real staple Riesling for me. So I hope you enjoy that. But as much as we said that pad Thai is a really recognizable dish, particularly for us in this country, it's a relatively recent addition to sort of the Thai cuisine sphere. And it actually traces its origins to a period of ultra-nationalism in Thailand in the wake of the 1932 revolution. So we're going to have a little history lesson here. Please feel free to be drinking your Riesling with your pad Thai. Don't stand on ceremony, but just while we can have a little kind of relaxed moment, I'm going to give you a brief history lesson on pad Thai. So please indulge me. So the 1932 revolution was what sort of ended the absolute monarchy in Thai history, and it gave rise to the uh, the democratic system of having a constitutional monarchy, which has existed since. Now, there was a bit of a campaign to try and promote Thai nationalism, and it was led by the then Prime Minister. Um, and I've been practicing the pronunciation, but if anyone speaks Thai, I do apologize if I pronounce this horribly. But the then Prime Minister was Field Marshal Plek Phibunsongkhram, and it was in the late 1930s that there was a public contest that they held to find a new national noodle dish. The winning entry was a plate of rice noodles, preserved radish, bean sprouts, peanut, and egg, which form the basis of what we would recognise as pad Thai today. But there is a lot more to it than that. Part of their kind of wanting to promote nationalism was also wanting to slightly shift the kind of Thai approach, or the Thai kind of Thailand as a country, to a more westernized feel, and to modernize it in keeping with a bit more of that more Western influence, and to weaken the influence of China. Now, obviously, all of this came about at the time of Thailand being recognized as Thailand and not Siam, and wanting to weaken that Chinese influence, hence there being a deliberate move away from wheat noodles, which were very popular at the time and had their origin in Chinese cuisine. So instead, it was rice noodles that were having a bit of the focus. And at the same time, the government wanted the Thai population to move away from having rice as their primary food staple, so that they could export the rice stocks to other countries to help move them out of their sort of depression era financial troubles. So there is a hell of a lot to pad Thai that I've never looked into, or thought, oh, other than this being a really delicious Thai dish, um, it's it's really influenced by in really interesting and detailed part of Thailand's history. So again, when we're looking at the influence of the different dishes, where there is different flavors coming through, there is a lot of variance, and we'll come on to that again with the final dish, with the Massaman curry. There's a lot of influence from Cambodia and Vietnam into the pad Thai dish, and that is also perhaps one of the reasons that it is called pad Thai, known as pad Thai, because having that Thai in there kind of gives it distinction, while also taking ownership of it as a dish, even though it's been heavily influenced by other regions. One of the other things that's lovely about pad Thai, and you may be experiencing this now if you are feeling a little bit overspiced from the Laab Moo, is that this is pretty inoffensively lacking in spice. It's got sweet, salty sourness to it, but it's not hot, it's not spicy. So it gives you a lot of flavor, but you don't need to have something that is really going to have to temper heat. So A, that means it's very popular in this country because as much as, everyone loves to think they can go nuts on a vindaloo, sometimes as a population, we're not that great with spice. So when you're choosing a wine for this one, you're wanting to have something that has a perception of sweetness, if not a little bit of sweetness in itself. Also have that acidity because you've got a lot of acidity from the lime juice and the vinegar, and that tangy, fruity note from the tamarind, as well as having the salty, savory, umami notes from the fish sauce, from the peanuts, even from the protein. So, if you've got tofu or if you've got chicken, both of those carry the glutamate, so they have that lovely umami savoriness. So you really want something that will really work well with that. And I think that something is a Riesling. So the Riesling that I have chosen for this one is a Marlborough. Oops, nearly got my glass there. I would have had to get my tea towel again. Is a Marlborough Riesling. It's from Hunters, and Hunters you may be familiar with as one of the leading producers in New Zealand. Jane Hunter, who has headed up the sort of running since 1987, she's was recognised and awarded an OBE for her work in sort of promoting and championing New Zealand viticulture. So, you're in good hands with a Hunter's Riesling. Now, this is, again, pretty affordable. It's, under £15. I think that's also a really nice consideration when you are pairing wines with this sort of food, because if you didn't want to do a takeaway and you were thinking, oh, I might actually go to a Thai restaurant, often, not always, and obviously depends on where you are, but often you might find that they will offer corkage. And so it becomes quite reasonable to pay corkage and take a wine that you like and will work with the dishes you want. And this Riesling, I think, ticks those boxes. Now, just smelling it, there's a cacophony of fruit in there. You've got your pears, peaches, limes, pineapple. It's a little tropical and it's very ripe. So that is where you're getting that lovely perception of sweetness. It's a dry wine, but it's not in that sort of austere category of Rieslings. It's not steely. It's not really kind of in terms of the dryness and acidity. There is a little bit of that lovely salinity on the palate. And if you look hard enough, you are getting a little bit of that slightly kerosene, petrol-y note. Yeah, there's just a touch of it on the nose that is really distinct with Riesling. And that would only enhance if you are leaving this for a few years. Now, it's not if I was wanting to age a Riesling, this wouldn't be the automatic one that I would turn to age, but it will take on a little bit more of that characteristic. Now, I'm going to show you this, and I don't know if you'll be able to see it because it might be backwards, so I apologise if it is. But if you've got the bottle, oh no, it is backwards. Sorry, that won't help you. It's verging into the in between dry to medium dry scale. They've got a scale, helpfully, on the back of their bottle, which is one of the great things that I think hunters do in terms of being very informative with their wines. And it just helps you really recognize where in the sweetness scale your Riesling lies. However, you don't have to have a sweet Riesling, you don't have to have a sweet Riesling for it to work with the dish, but you just need to have some sweetness to the flavour, if that makes sense. If it doesn't, I'll try and explain it in another way. What's also really nice about this one is it's 11.5%. So it's quite light in alcohol. And the reason why that is nice, particularly with the pad thai, is because although there is intensity of flavour, there isn't a real overwhelming singular flavour that sticks out, primarily being spice that we've talked about in the other dishes. So it's not trying to fight. It's a nice enough amount of alcohol that it still feels structural. It's not becoming flabby, and it's standing up to the flavour that is there, but it's not overly out of balance. So Hunters, as mentioned, is a world-class producer in New Zealand. They are based in the Wairau Valley in Marlborough, and it was actually Jane and her late husband Ernie that started Hunter's Wines. So they planted the vines in 1979. And in the 80s, after the release of the early vintages of their wines, they started winning international awards, which was previously unheard of for New Zealand wine. Tragically and very sadly, it was only a few years into their venture that Ernie was killed in a road accident. And so it was then that Jane took over, and she has, as mentioned, been running the show ever since. Although her two nephews, James and William, no, James and Edward, sorry, James and Edward have now joined her in the work. There she is amongst her vines, looking every bit the matriarch of excellent wine, the matriarch of Marlborough. Let's call her that, because she really has done wonders for New Zealand's viticulture and for Marlborough and the establishing of Marlborough as a fantastic place for New Zealand wine and wine in the world. What they also champion in Hunters in their vineyards is biodiversity. They work a lot with the aims of being sustainable and enhancing their biodiversity. And one of the things that they have done, which just looks incredible, is they have pioneered an extensive native garden. I mean, doesn't this just look wonderful? It's an oasis of native plants. There's over 1,000 different native plants here. And it is in a mature dry land area of the Wairau Plains. And it just enriches the Rapura vineyards. They've got Totara, they've got Lancewood, they've got cowhide trees. It really enhances the ecosystem while, establishing history, really, and this fantastic biodiversity in their vineyards. So that is one of the things that they do to work to their sustainability aims. They also use winery wastewater for garden irrigation, which again is small but just as important. And then the trees that they have in their native garden obviously also provide shelter and habitat for the little creatures and critters of the area as well. So this is one of my favorite things about wine, actually, about food and wine, is the recognition of different regions and the kind of cultural and geographical history that all comes together, and it's what makes it such a magical topic. Wine particularly, it encompasses everything, doesn't it? So isn't it nice that we all have this as a hobby? And luckily, very luckily, I get to have it as a career. But yeah, isn't it fascinating the amount of different things that come from winemakers and the challenges and the opportunities that they have while producing something delicious for us. And it sounds like the deliciousness of this pairing is going down well. Alistair, you're saying that the Riesling and the Pad Thai is your favorite combination. I mean, that is high praise indeed. I think I'd love to know if anyone else is sharing Alistair's view that it is one of the top pairings for them. My aim for this is that everything gets a little bit of love. If everyone likes one or the other of everything, then that is great. And also, if you're finding that they're not quite working for you, that is also fine, because we are all different. We all have different palates. We all are working to different recipes or different takeaways, different supermarkets. So what works for some may not work for others, but that's the niceness and the variety that we have with this. Now we are on to our final pairing, and this is our only red wine of the selection. That is intentional because, excuse me, because being a red wine, it carries with it a lot of tannin, higher alcohol. That's not to say all red wines are higher alcohol, but this one in particular has that higher alcohol. And so it needed to have a dish that is able to withstand those elements. Now, Richard, you've bought a Thai green curry. Fantastic. With a pinotage and then Riesling. Oh, pinotage has thrown a sediment. That is not uncommon with pinotage. But unfortunately, if you find the sediment and you weren't expecting it, it's not always that pleasant. Jane, you're not usually a fan of a Riesling, or not usually a Riesling lover, but the Pad Thai and Riesling works well. Adrienne, you quite agree, but you also like the Saumur with the fish cake, so it's great pairing. So this is great. I hope my final pairing gets as much appreciation. So this is, it's a great sound, isn't it? As mentioned, this is our red wine of the evening, which is a Lebanese red wine. It is the Massaya Le Colombier, and it's from the Bekaa Valley. And this is to be paired with Massaman curry. Now, again, I'm going to talk very quickly about the food first, because there's a little bit more detail to this one as well. And then I will talk about the wine and why I think this pairing works. And just so I'm not overly rushing you through your through your dishes, I will be reheating my pad thai post event to oh, I don't know what I'll have with, probably the Riesling. But yes, so the Massaman curry. Now I suggested whether you could have it with beef or chicken. Chicken is often what you will most commonly see it with, and beef, or with another protein base if you're going for sort of a vegetarian protein equivalent. It's a mildly spiced curry. It's not too forceful in the sort of spice heat levels. And it's quite rich and warming. Again, you've got peanuts in there. It's got a coconut base, but what it also has is what we would perhaps refer to as a more aromatic baking spice influence. So you've got bay leaves, cinnamon, nutmeg, cumin, again coriander, again galangal. You've got some lemongrass, so adding a little freshness. And then as your additions to the meat part, you've got potatoes and often some onion. And it's a rich, kind of warming, fragrant and deeper curry style. It's a fusion dish. It combines the kind of ingredients and influences from three main sources, so being Persia, the Indian subcontinent, and the Malay archipelago. So Massaman curry, Massaman isn't a word in Thai. It's a word that has come about from a Persian word, which is a Musulman, which translates to Muslim. Um, and the dish has those Muslim, like Islamic origins from that Persian influence in there as well, and some of that influence from the Malay. And that is why you will more often see it as chicken or beef and not pork in the same way that you see pork quite a lot on a Thai menu. Now, obviously, in the UK, in takeaways and restaurants, that pork often has now become an option because it is working to the UK consumer that perhaps is not, as familiar or perhaps, just not requiring it to have those halal origins. So you can have it with pork here. If you're making it at home, you can have it with pork. The meat itself doesn't matter too much. It's all of those flavors around it. So the flavors that aren't particularly always found in, or not originally found in Thailand, is the things like the cumin, the nutmeg, cinnamon. There's sometimes star anise. So those sort of flavors weren't traditionally found in Thailand, which is how it's all kind of fused together as this delicious dish. And I would say perhaps the ideal January Thai dish, because it is warming, it's nourishing. It feels like you're giving your body a hug from the inside, and I wanted a wine to go alongside that as well. Again, we're going to have a little bit of history, just as to the theories of how Massaman curry came to Thailand. The first is thought to have come from a prominent Persian merchant who introduced Massaman curry and Muslim cuisine to the royal court of Ayutthaya in the 17th century. So it's been around a while. And another theory looks more to the southern border, where the country where Thailand sort of meets northern Malaysia, and their recipes had been shared that were both Malay and Indian. So you're getting the influence of the spices coming through that way. And then a further theory is that the dish's roots are in southern Thailand, which is where there is a majority of a big or a larger Islamic population in Thailand. And so, through cultural history, they have brought the dish and, championed it there. And then obviously everyone's gone, that's delicious. We'd like some too. And it's become really popular in Thailand, and conversely in the UK as a key Thai dish, a key element of Thai cuisine for us, either as a takeaway or in a restaurant. Again, there is going to be some history here because we are looking at a Lebanese wine, and winemaking in Lebanon in the Bekaa Valley has been happening for years. Understandably, and sadly, obviously there are challenges, current challenges, historical challenges to winemaking in Lebanon. But what is fantastic is that there is still wine being produced, and we still get to enjoy it, and therefore then support those winemakers in those regions. So this is the Massaya Le Colombier. It's the 2021 vintage, and it has a lovely softness to it. It is full-bodied, but it is Grenache Noir, Cinsault, and Tempranillo. So we're revisiting Tempranillo in a different way. Again, the vines are planted at altitude in the Bekaa Valley, so we have that lovely acidity to it, which sometimes can be a little bit harder to identify in a red wine because you've got a lot of other structural elements going on. But the fruit is juicy, it's supple, and it also has those lovely spices. It's not overly peppery, but it has that lovely sort of nutmeggy, cinnamon, clove. Again, you've got those baking spices coming through. Oh, Alice, you're saying that your takeaway is delicious and the red is a perfect partner. That's fantastic. Nicola, I'm sorry that your curry's not great, but I'm glad that you're finding the wine lovely. Oh, and Andrew, you've got a Sangiovese with a beef massaman. I bet that is fantastic. Yeah, it's got that really supple tannin structure to it. So it's a little grippy when you're having it just by itself. But because you've got that lovely protein in the curry, because it is pretty meat heavy and obviously some potatoes and onions, but as a key part is that it is a meat in a thicker gravy, you've got those proteins which will really help with softening any feel of the tannin being a little bit too structured, um, while also just blending in a really beautiful way. Now, Messiah, as a producer, I mean, their history goes back over 40 years, but it's only in the last few years, the last couple of decades, that they have really sort of established themselves as one of the most respected and well-loved wineries in Lebanon. Obviously, if you are a fan of Lebanese wine, or even if this is your first foray into Lebanese wine, you may be familiar with Chateau Moussa as as a Lebanese winery and winemakers. They also create some fantastic wines that would also go really well with this sort of cuisine. But Messiah have really kind of run the gauntlet of establishing themselves in the last 2 decades without, let's not, ignore the fact that they've had the challenges in the same way that Musa have. So it was in the early 70s that the Gozen family acquired a table wine growing vineyard in the Bekaa Valley. So here we've got the Bekaa Valley and some of their vineyards. And historically, the Bekaa Valley is one of the most famous and fertile wine producing areas in Lebanon. It's home to the Temple of Bacchus, the Roman god of wine. But initially, they used to just use their grapes to distill arak, which is a traditional Levantine spirit. I don't know if anyone has had arak before. It's very aniseedy. I'm not a massive aniseed lover, so I find it a little bit tricky. And it's often drunk with water, and it's a clear spirit. But then when you add it into water, it goes this kind of milky, cloudy color. So they first used their grapes to distill arak, and they still produce arak today. But it was the sons Sami and Ramsey that grew up in the vineyards. They loved the nature, and they really wanted to sort of turn their hand to the wine. Sadly, see, in 1975, civil war broke out, and the family had to leave the vineyards. Here are the family. I would judge by the fashion. Perhaps we're looking late 60s, early 70s here. Um, Perhaps by the haircuts as well. There's some mullet going on there that is becoming back in fashion. But yes, sadly, in the 1975, when the Civil War broke out, they had to abandon the estate. And it was 17 years later that Sami revisited the war-ravaged Messiah. They had a little bit of trickiness when they were first coming back because there was some squatting inhabitants that had to be encouraged to leave. But So much so was Sammy's belief in the land and the opportunity that it persuaded him to leave his life as an architect in Los Angeles. He convinced Ramsey, his brother, to leave his restaurant company in France, and it was time for them to get back to the family domain and breathe new life into it, and into the wines. Now, the Le Colombier is one where they have some assistance, and there is some influence that you can recognize in here, um, from a more sort of French influence. And that is because they have Daniel Brunier of Vaux Telegraph in Châteauneuf-du-Pape, and they have Dominique Herbrad from Saint-Emilion owning a share of Massaya each, and they have helped in its success. So they've used their influence, they have used their experience in creating these Rhone style-ish wines, while still making sure that the final wine is reflective of of their of their terroir, of their style. They're not wanting it to be a French style wine from Lebanon. They're wanting it to be a Lebanese red wine that has some recognizable qualities that, if you like French, like classic Rhone wines, you will also like this one, which I think is fantastic. They obviously have the climatic and geographical influence and assistance of the Bekaa Valley. So obviously you've got the mountains that protect the vineyards from the sea and the desert. You've got the cool nights, that climatic diurnal range for the cool nights to compensate for the hot summer. Again, we're coming back to having that really like repeating acidity. And I mentioned it's kind of can be a bit hard to sometimes decipher acidity in a red wine. I'm not going to do it because you are all eating your dinner. But one way that, if you are assessing wines or at another wine tasting, a way to kind of recognize acidity is to take a little bit of the wine in your mouth, swallow it, and then let your chin just drop and tilt your head, and then feel a little bit of the moisture coming down the inside of your cheeks. If it's making your mouth water, that's how you can sort of recognize your levels of acidity in there. And because you've got it as Sanso, you've got that Grenache Noir, and you've got that Tempranillo in there, you're getting that lovely true red fruit to it. There's a lovely little savory element to it. And they keep the wine in concrete vats, which helps the tannins become that little bit more supple. Concrete is an inert vessel, but there is some suggestion that there is some micro-oxygenation occurring, so that can also help soften out some of the tannins that you are experiencing in the wine as well, creating this lovely, juicy, supple and soft red wine, which, I think goes really well with the Massaman curry. And I think if you are having something like maybe a Penang curry as well, which has got similar flavors, then this would be a great one. Oh, Richard, thank you. Great job selling this wine. I'm not on commission. I just really think it's great. I think if you are wanting to explore more of Massaya as well, their whites are fantastic, and really worth a look at. And Lebanese wine in general, if it's one that you've not perhaps encountered. And on the topic of Lebanon, other lesser known wine regions, so Hungary, Georgia, I say lesser known, but you just have to look at the fact that the temple of Bacchus is in Lebanon, so history of wine has been there for years. You look at Georgian wine, and you look at the qvevris, the terracotta or clay vats that are used for their wines. It's been happening for thousands of years, and it's now that it's getting recognition more so in the wider consumer market. So I I think if you want to take anything else away from this session is explore your wine regions and branch out a little, because you can really pick up some gems. But it's great. Oh, Sarah and Colin, you had a Penang curry and it's going great with that as well. That's, yeah, that's fantastic because it's nice to see. I think we've got a real range of four different wines that have similar qualities, but very different styles. If you didn't have the food and you were just doing a little tasting lineup, they would be really quite contrasting. And the dishes as well are really, quite different. There's again similarities in flavors, but we've looked at the origins, the history. There's real different influence there. And I think this gives you a real kind of selection of flavors and styles. Oh, Nicola, you'd love a Georgian tasting event. Oh, when I go back to the office on Monday, I'll mention it to the team and we'll see. I think Georgian wine is fantastic. But we have now come to the end of our food and wines. Um, this isn't a rush for you to finish your food and wines. I hope if you still have um, food to eat and wines to drink, you do so for the rest of your evening. But thank you so much for joining me. I really hope you've enjoyed it. If you are a fan of these sort of food and wine focused online events, we do have quite a few coming up in the diary. We've got some more of Gil and Paolo, our chef, doing some sort of focused um, food and wine pairing evenings. They've got a What Grows Together Goes Together Greek food and wine Zoom event on the 21st of February. We've also got some more just solely wine focused tastings coming up as well online. We've got International Riesling Day on the 13th of March. If you are now enhancing your love of Riesling following the Riesling and the Pad Thai. And we also have a Syrah in the Spotlight on the 12th of February. So do have a look at the website, see what's coming up, what you would maybe like to join us for again. Or perhaps if we see you in person at an event, do say hello. But thank you so much for joining me. Have a lovely rest of your evening and have a great weekend.